Have you ever noticed how some compliments sound sweet, but feel sour? They seem polite, even kind, but something about them stings. That's not praise, it's strategy. A hidden insult disguised as flattery. Like when someone smiles and says, "Didn't expect that from you," or slips in a "for someone like you" twist. It's not about celebrating you, it's about controlling how you see yourself. They expect you to smile, nod, say thank you, while they quietly chip away at your confidence. But the moment you stop playing along, that's when they lose control. It's like soap laced with glass. It looks clean, smells fresh, but the more you rub it in, the deeper it cuts. That's what these compliments are, meant to wash over you, but designed to leave scars. Because while they're wrapping judgment in flattery, you have a choice. Smile through it, or call it what it is. And the moment you stop accepting compliments that belittle you, that's when they feel exposed. That's when their tone changes. Because now they know you see through the act. So how do you recognize the compliments that are actually insults, without second-guessing yourself, without over-explaining, without saying a word? Stay with me till the end, because the last one will change the way you hear praise forever. Let's get started. Number 1. You're surprisingly smart. Let's talk about a comment that sounds like praise, but actually cuts deeper than most people realize. You're surprisingly smart. At first glance, it might seem like a compliment. After all, who wouldn't want to be called smart, right? But pay attention to the wording. That one little word, surprisingly, says it all. It doesn't just acknowledge your intelligence, it reveals that they never expected you to have it in the first place. And that's not a compliment, that's a quiet insult, wrapped in sugar, delivered with a smile. Here's the truth. When someone says, "You're surprisingly smart," what they're really saying is, "I had low expectations for you." Maybe it's based on how you look, how you speak, your background, or even your quiet nature. Whatever the reason, they already built a version of you in their mind, and intelligence wasn't part of it. And now that you've proven them wrong, instead of adjusting their perception, they point it out like it's a novelty, as if your mind is a hidden feature they didn't see coming. But don't let their praise fool you. It says far more about their assumptions than your actual ability. This is where Stoic psychology comes in. Epictetus once said, "What others think of you reveals their mind, not your worth." And that couldn't be more true here. If someone is surprised by your intelligence, that's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their bias. It shows how limited their view of you was, and how quick they were to judge. A wise person doesn't take offense, but they also don't internalize that kind of compliment. They recognize it for what it is, an insult dressed up as flattery. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Rachel, was giving a presentation at work. She nailed it. Clear, confident, persuasive. After the meeting, a colleague came up and said, "Wow, you're surprisingly smart," and smiled like they had just paid her the biggest compliment in the world. But Rachel wasn't flattered. She was stunned. This was someone she'd worked with for months, someone who clearly never expected much from her. That one sentence told her everything she needed to know. They had underestimated her from the start. And now, instead of apologizing for their misjudgment, they were calling it a compliment. So how do you respond to backhanded praise like this? First, don't react emotionally. Let it reveal their mindset, not disrupt your peace. Second, remember your worth isn't measured by their expectations. You were always capable. They just didn't see it. And finally, Choose who you allow into your inner circle. The people who genuinely value you won't be surprised by your brilliance. They'll recognize it from day one. At the end of the day, someone's surprise at your intelligence says nothing about your limits and everything about theirs. Let them keep their assumptions. You've got nothing to prove. Number 2, you look great for your age. Let's talk about a compliment that sounds sweet on the surface but carries a sharp undertone. You look great for your age. At first, it might feel flattering. After all, someone's acknowledging your appearance. But that second part, for your age, completely changes the meaning. Instead of simply saying you look great, they've added a condition, a limitation. It's no longer a compliment about how you look, it's a reminder of how old you are and how good you look considering that. That's not praise. That's a subtle reminder that your time has passed and you're just doing better than expected. Here's the truth. When someone says, you look great for your age, what they're really doing is dressing up judgment as praise. They're not just admiring how you look, they're emphasizing that you're older and that you're not supposed to look this good. It's a comparison between who you are and who they think you should be based on a number. And that's the problem. Compliments that rely on comparison aren't about appreciation. They're about control. They place you in a category and then act surprised when you don't fit their narrative. This is where Stoic insight cuts through the fluff. Marcus Aurelius said, "Flattery that highlights limitation is a disguise of judgment." That's exactly what this is. It's flattery with a hidden critique, an attempt to praise you while keeping you boxed in. And the wise person knows how to spot the difference. Real compliments lift you up. They don't come with qualifiers. They don't remind you of your flaws or your age. They simply recognize something admirable. No strings attached. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Laura, was at a dinner party when someone told her, "Wow, you look amazing for someone in their 40s. She smiled politely, but later told me that the comment lingered. It wasn't the compliment that bothered her. It was the reminder that the person saw her age first, not her presence. They weren't saying, "You look amazing." They were saying, "You look better than I expected you to, at your stage of life." And that's not a real compliment. That's a subtle reminder of what society thinks she should look like. Laura realized in that moment, this wasn't about her beauty. It was about someone else's limited view of what aging should look like. So how do you handle compliments like this? First, recognize the hidden message. Don't let flattery that contains judgment affect how you see yourself. Second, understand that age is not a flaw. It's proof of growth, resilience, and strength. Third, surround yourself with people who don't qualify their praise. If you look great, you look great. No conditions needed. At the end of the day, anyone who sees your age before they see your light is looking through the wrong lens. Let their words roll off. You don't need reminders of how old you are. You need people who respect how far you've come. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3. You're so brave to wear that. Let's talk about a compliment that's anything but. You're so brave to wear that. On the surface, it might sound empowering. It might even come with a smile and a tone that says, "Good for you." But if you listen closely, you'll hear the real message underneath. It's not admiration, it's surprise. They're not complimenting your style. They're questioning your decision to wear something they wouldn't have dared to. What they're really saying is, that outfit doesn't fit the image I have of you, but look at you wearing it anyway. Here's the truth. When someone says, "You're so brave to wear that," It's not about your confidence, it's about their judgment. Your fashion, your self-expression, your choices, they've all triggered something in them. And rather than owning that discomfort, they wrap it in false praise. It's a backhanded way of saying, I wouldn't be caught dead in that, but you do you. That's not respect. That's subtle ridicule hiding behind polite language, and this is where Stoic wisdom cuts through the noise. Seneca once said, "He who is confident in himself seeks no permission." A confident person doesn't ask the world to approve their appearance, their expression, or their identity. They don't dress to impress, they dress to express. They don't shrink themselves to make others comfortable. If your style challenges someone else's idea of what's appropriate, that's their limitation, not yours. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, let's call her Naomi, decided to wear a bold outfit to a work event. It was something that expressed her culture, her personality, and her confidence. She wasn't looking for attention, she was simply being herself. But midway through the evening, someone walked up and said, "You're so brave to wear that here." Naomi smiled, but she felt it. The tone wasn't admiration. It was judgment disguised as flattery. That one sentence didn't make her feel seen, it made her feel like an outsider, not because of what she wore, but because of how someone else reacted to it. That comment revealed more about the other person's limited perspective than it ever did about her choices. So, how do you respond when someone gives you a compliment like that? First, recognize it for what it is, an opinion, not a truth. Second, remember that you don't need anyone's permission to show up as yourself. Third, keep showing up anyway. Your confidence will always unsettle those who lack their own. At the end of the day, someone else's discomfort with your expression is not your problem to solve. You don't need to be brave to wear something, you just need to be free. And once you own who you are, no one's opinion, no matter how subtly wrapped, can shake that. Number 4. You've lost weight. You look so much better. Let's talk about a compliment that's far more damaging than it appears. You've lost weight. You look so much better. To most people, it sounds like encouragement. It sounds like praise. But when you break it down, it carries a subtle, cutting message. You didn't look good before. And that's where the harm lives, not in the recognition of change, but in the judgment of who you were before the change. It doesn't celebrate health or growth. It ties your value to how closely you fit someone else's image of what's acceptable. Here's the truth. When someone says this, they aren't complimenting your discipline or well-being. They're implying your worth has increased simply because your body has changed. And that's dangerous, because it reinforces the toxic idea that your value depends on your appearance. It tells you that thinner is automatically better, that beauty equals validation, and that the before version of you was somehow less deserving of respect. It doesn't matter whether the weight loss was intentional or even healthy. The message stays the same. You're more acceptable now. This is where Stoic wisdom brings clarity. Epictetus said, "The body is a vessel. It's the soul that defines a person." The Stoics never put worth in appearance. To them, what mattered was your character, your actions, your mind, not your shape, not your size, not how well you fit into society's narrow standards of beauty. A wise person knows that real change is internal. Physical change may happen, but it should never be the measure of who you are or how worthy you are of praise. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Grace, had been through a rough time. She lost weight unintentionally while navigating stress, anxiety, and a personal crisis. When she returned to work, people commented non-stop, "You've lost weight. You look amazing." But no one asked how she was doing. No one checked in. They saw a smaller version of her and assumed that meant she was doing better. What they didn't realize is that she was struggling, not thriving. And every time someone praised her weight loss, it reinforced the idea that only this version of her, this diminished, fragile version, was worthy of compliments. So, how do you respond to comments like this? First, understand the difference between a genuine compliment and one built on appearance-based standards. Second, choose to value yourself in ways that go far beyond how you look. And third, don't let others define your worth based on your body. Their standards are not your truth. At the end of the day, real praise should never be tied to appearance. It should recognize who you are, not what you look like. You're not better because you're smaller. You're valuable because of the soul you carry, and no change in your body will ever define the strength within it. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5. You're not like the others. Let's talk about a compliment that feels good at first, but slowly reveals something unsettling underneath. You're not like the others. It sounds special, doesn't it? Like you've been singled out, seen, even elevated above the crowd. But sit with it for a moment. Because this kind of praise doesn't just build you up. It tears others down in the process. It creates a divide, an invisible wall between you and them, whoever they may be. And while you're standing on that pedestal, it starts to get a little lonely and a little uneasy. Here's the truth. When someone says, "You're not like the others," they're offering you approval at a cost. The cost is separation. You're being told you're exceptional, not because of who you are, but because of how you differ from the group they've decided is beneath you. It's a compliment rooted in division. It's meant to make you feel special, but it also plants a seed of doubt. It subtly asks you to see yourself as better, and then to hold on to that difference like a badge. But the moment you accept praise that separates you, you're being manipulated. Because now, you're more focused on maintaining that distance than being true to yourself. This is where Stoic wisdom brings clarity. Seneca said, "Praise that divides is praise that manipulates." That means when someone compliments you by putting others down, it's not about your growth. It's about control. They want you to feel chosen. They want you to seek more of their approval. And they want to shape your identity through contrast, not through truth. A wise person doesn't fall for it. They recognize that comparison is not connection and superiority is not strength. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, let's call her Emily, was new at her job. During her first week, a manager pulled her aside and said, "You're not like the others on your team. You actually get it." At first, Emily felt proud. She thought she was being recognized for her intelligence. But as time passed, she realized the manager said the same thing to others, just with a different spin. It wasn't a compliment, it was a tactic. It created competition, suspicion, and tension within the team. And instead of uniting people, it made them feel like they had to constantly prove their worth. Emily realized that being singled out wasn't about praise, it was about power. So how do you handle compliments like this? First, recognize the motive. Ask yourself, are they praising me or trying to separate me? Second, resist the urge to seek validation by comparison. True confidence doesn't need contrast. And third, Choose to rise without needing to stand on anyone else's shoulders. At the end of the day, any praise that divides is not about your greatness. It's about their agenda. Don't let it shape how you see others or how you see yourself. You don't need to be different to be valuable. You just need to be real. Number 6, you're too nice. Let's talk about a phrase that gets thrown around like a compliment, but carries more judgment than appreciation. You're too nice. On the surface, it sounds harmless, maybe even flattering. But if you pause and really hear it, you'll realize it's not admiration, it's a warning. When someone says you're too nice, what they're really suggesting is that your kindness is a flaw, that you're naive, that you're too trusting, too soft, too easy to manipulate, and suddenly your goodness becomes a liability in their eyes, not a strength. Here's the truth. When someone says you're too nice, they're not celebrating your character, they're questioning your strength. It's their way of saying, you're not tough enough, or you let people walk all over you. But that says more about them than it does about you. They see kindness as weakness because they've learned to value power, dominance, and control. They assume that being nice means being passive, that being generous means you don't have boundaries, but they're wrong. True kindness isn't a lack of strength, it's the highest form of it. It takes far more courage to stay compassionate in a harsh world than it does to grow cold and guarded. This is where Stoic wisdom steps in. Epictetus said, "Virtue must not become a weakness in the eyes of the unwise." In other words, just because someone doesn't understand your kindness doesn't mean it's a problem. Their inability to see the power in your patience doesn't make you naive. It just shows how little they know about strength. A Stoic doesn't harden their heart to gain respect. They stay kind, but with boundaries. They offer warmth, but without letting others take advantage. They don't change their nature just to fit into someone else's narrow view of what it means to be strong. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Ethan, was the type of person who always helped others. He was thoughtful, respectful, and carried himself with humility. One day, a co-worker told him, "You're too nice. People are going to eat you alive." At first, Ethan took it to heart. He wondered if he needed to change, maybe be more aggressive. But with time, he realized that his kindness wasn't the issue. The real issue was the kind of people he was surrounded by. The problem wasn't that Ethan was too nice. The problem was that others were too selfish to understand what real strength looks like. So how do you handle being told you're too nice? First, don't let it shake your identity. Being kind is not a flaw, it's a decision. Second, make sure your kindness is supported by clear boundaries. You can be generous without being used. And third, stop apologizing for your nature. The world doesn't need less kindness, it needs more of it, expressed by people who know exactly who they are. At the end of the day, your kindness is a reflection of your strength, not your softness. Let the unwise mislabel it if they must. Just make sure you keep showing up as someone who leads with integrity, even when the world can't quite understand it. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 7. You're doing great. Considering your situation. Let's talk about a compliment that pretends to uplift but quietly puts you in a box. You're doing great, considering your situation. At first, it sounds supportive. It sounds like encouragement. But the second half of that sentence changes everything. Suddenly, your progress isn't just being acknowledged, it's being measured against a set of assumed limitations. The compliment isn't about how far you've come, It's about how low they expected you to be. It says, "You're doing well for someone like you." And that's not encouragement. That's judgment disguised as praise. Here's the truth. When someone says this, they're not really recognizing your growth. They're highlighting what they think should have held you back. Maybe it's your background, your finances, your mental health, your job, your family. Whatever it is, they've already built a narrative in their mind, a version of you that wasn't supposed to succeed. And now that you're doing well, they can't just say, "You're doing great." They have to add that little reminder, "despite everything." As if your success only matters when it's measured against struggle. This is where Stoic wisdom reframes the whole perspective. Marcus Aurelius said, "The measure of growth is not where you start, but that you continue." In other words, the only thing that matters is movement, progress, effort. You don't owe anyone a success story that makes them feel better about your beginnings. You don't have to let your story be defined by your circumstances. Your journey is yours, unfolding in your time, by your standards, not something for others to grade based on how bad they think you had it. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Anthony, grew up in a rough neighborhood, raised by a single mom, and worked 2 jobs while putting himself through community college. Years later, he was running his own business. Successful, stable, focused. But at a networking event, someone smiled and said, "Wow, you're doing great, considering where you came from." Anthony didn't flinch, but later he told me that sentence stuck with him. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a ceiling, as if no matter how far he came, he'd always be measured against where he started. That comment didn't reflect his growth, it reflected their assumptions. So, how do you handle these kinds of compliments? First, recognize them for what they are. Biased praise rooted in low expectations. Second, don't let their narrative rewrite your journey. Your success stands on its own, no qualifiers needed. And third, continue to move forward with grace. You're not here to impress those who underestimated you. You're here to honor the person you've become. At the end of the day, true growth isn't about defying what others expect. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. So when someone says, "You're doing great," remember this: you're not defined by your situation. You're defined by your strength to rise beyond it. Keep going. No explanation necessary. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply.